You know that feeling. Waking from a dream of someone you have loved and lost, and lying very still, not reaching for your phone, not moving at all, because somewhere in the quiet, they are still there. Tonight we are going to that place, the place where grief and neuroscience meet. Welcome to Psychology for Sleep. Wherever you are right now, whatever weight you have been carrying, let it rest beside you for a while. You don't need to hold it tonight. We will move through 100 psychology facts about visitation dreams, the science of what happens when someone we have loved appears to us in sleep, from the architecture of memory to the neuroscience of grief, to the quiet place where longing becomes something softer. This kind of content finds people at the right moment. Someone out there tonight is searching for exactly this, a gentle place to bring the person they are still missing. If this is that place for you, a soft like or subscribe helps another grieving soul find their way here too. One quiet night at a time. Let yourself settle now. Feel the surface beneath you. Let your shoulders release. Just slightly. You don't need to understand everything tonight. You don't need to hold anything together. Let these gentle facts wash over you like the memory of a voice you love. Present, then fading, then at peace. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. You are resting in the space where memory keeps the people it loves most. Let your mind soften into what it already knows. And now we begin. Dreams of the deceased are among the most commonly reported dream experiences in the world. Research published across grief science, sleep medicine, and cultural psychology consistently finds that the majority of bereaved individuals across cultures, ages, and circumstances report having at least one vivid dream in which a person who has died appears as present, alive, and recognizable. These are not nightmares. They are not disturbing in the way we might expect. They are, overwhelmingly, described as comforting, as real, as something the dreamer did not want to leave. We give these dreams many names. Visitation dreams, grief dreams, post-bereavement dreams. But most people simply call them what they feel like, a visit. The scientific term for these experiences is post-bereavement dream experiences, sometimes abbreviated as PBDS. Sleep researchers and grief counselors use this term to distinguish them from ordinary dreams that happen to feature someone who has died. In a post-bereavement dream experience, the person who appears is typically perceived as themselves, not symbolic, not transformed, not threatening. They arrive as the dreamer knew them. They may speak. They may offer something. Comfort, a gesture, an ordinary moment that feels like a gift. What separates these dreams from other encounters with the deceased in sleep is the quality of presence. Something in these dreams feels different from ordinary dreaming. Researchers are still investigating exactly why. Dreams occur primarily during REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, a stage characterized by high levels of brain activity, near-complete muscle relaxation, and vivid, story-like mental experiences. During REM sleep, the visual cortex is highly active. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain involved in reality checking and rational evaluation, becomes significantly less active. This combination, rich internal imagery with reduced critical monitoring, is what makes dreams feel so real while we are inside them. It is also what makes the presence of a deceased loved one feel so completely convincing. During REM, the brain is not asking whether this is possible. It is simply experiencing it. And in that space, someone we love can simply be there. Memory and emotion are deeply intertwined in the sleeping brain. The hippocampus, which is central to memory consolidation, remains active during sleep. The amygdala, which processes emotional significance, is also highly active, more active in some stages of REM sleep than during waking life. This means that the brain during sleep has access to our most emotionally significant memories with particular vividness. Grief researchers have long noted that the people who appear most often in post-bereavement dreams are those who are most emotionally significant to the dreamer, not simply those who died most recently. The brain does not organize loss chronologically. It organizes it by love. Studies of grief across many cultures find a striking consistency in how these dreams are described. Whether the dreamer is from East Asia, North America, Sub-Saharan Africa, or Northern Europe, the language used to describe a visit from a deceased loved one follows recognizable patterns. The person appears well. They appear at peace. They often communicate, directly or through gesture, that they are all right, and the dreamer wakes feeling, in many cases, better than they did before sleep. Cultural frameworks differ. Some traditions interpret these dreams as literal spiritual visits. Others understand them neurologically. But the phenomenology, what the experience actually feels like from the inside, is remarkably consistent across human cultures and centuries. The frequency of post-bereavement dreams appears to follow a general pattern across grief. In the early weeks and months after a loss, dreams of the deceased are common and often intense. Over time, they may become less frequent, but they tend to remain emotionally significant for much longer. Some bereaved individuals report dreaming of a loved one years or even decades after the death, with the same quality of presence. Grief researchers note that these later dreams are often less distressing than early ones and are frequently described as gifts, moments of unexpected reconnection that arrive without warning and leave the dreamer with something difficult to name but real. Not everyone who is bereaved experiences post-bereavement dreams, and researchers are interested in understanding why. Several factors appear to influence whether these dreams occur. The closeness of the relationship matters. The more emotionally significant the bond, the more likely the person is to dream of the deceased. The nature of the death matters. Sudden or traumatic losses sometimes initially produce different dream profiles than anticipated or peaceful deaths. The dreamer's own relationship with sleep matters. Individuals who sleep longer and experience more REM sleep have more opportunities for these dreams to occur, and something less easily measured. Perhaps the particular way grief lives in a specific person also appears to play a role. The neuroscience of grief reveals that losing someone we love is, in part, a neurological event. The brain forms what researchers call a predictive model of the people who are important to us, an internal simulation built from years of interaction that anticipates their presence, their voice, their likely responses. When that person dies, the predictive model does not immediately update. It continues to generate expectations. A hand on a door handle, a familiar laugh, a voice in another room, that are then met with absence. This is part of why grief is so physiologically exhausting. The brain is working to update a model it built over years, sometimes decades. Sleep is one of the primary times this updating occurs. During sleep, and particularly during REM sleep, the brain continues the work of processing emotional memories. This process, sometimes called emotional memory consolidation, involves replaying, integrating, and recontextualizing emotionally significant experiences from waking life. For the grieving brain, this means that sleep is not a break from grief. It is, in part, a continuation of it, but a gentler, more organized continuation, one that happens below the threshold of conscious distress. Dreams of the deceased may represent one manifestation of this process, the brain working, in the only way it knows how, to integrate an absence it is still learning to carry. So already, 10 facts in, something is becoming clear. These dreams are not random. They are not noise. They are, in a meaningful sense, the brain doing something purposeful, something that has to do with love and loss, and the enormous neurological work of carrying both. The fact that they feel real is not an accident of imperfect brain function. It is what the brain is designed to do, make the people who matter to us present. Even when they are absent, sleep simply removes the barrier between what we know and what the brain, in its deepest layers, still holds. The content of post-bereavement dreams tends to differ meaningfully from other dreams. Ordinary dreams are often fragmented, shifting, strange, settings that change without logic, narratives that don't quite cohere. Dreams of deceased loved ones, by contrast, are frequently described as unusually coherent. The person appears in a recognizable context. The interaction makes emotional sense. There is a quality of deliberateness, not in the supernatural sense, but in the phenomenological sense, as if the dream has a specific emotional task it is trying to accomplish. Researchers describe this as goal-directed dreaming, and while the science of what drives it is still developing, the pattern is consistent enough to be noteworthy. Dreams of the deceased often involve the loved one communicating a form of reassurance. This is one of the most consistently reported features across cultures and studies. The deceased person, to a parent, a partner, a child, a close friend, appears and, in some way, conveys that they are well. They may say so directly. They may simply embody it, arriving with a calm, a warmth, a quality of okayness that the dreamer absorbs without words. Grief researchers note that this feature of visitation dreams is particularly significant for the bereaved, because it addresses one of grief's most aching questions: are they all right? Wherever they are now, in the dream, the answer is yes. Touch in post-bereavement dreams deserves its own attention. Many dreamers report not only seeing and hearing a deceased loved one, but physically feeling their presence. A hand held, a hug, the weight of someone sitting beside them. During REM sleep, the somatosensory cortex, the area of the brain that processes physical sensation, is active. The brain is capable of generating experiences of touch that feel, in the moment, entirely real. For someone who has lost the physical presence of a person they loved, the experience of being held by them in a dream, even knowing what it is upon waking, can carry enormous emotional weight. The body, in some sense, gets to remember. Research in thanatology, the study of death and dying, has increasingly recognized post-bereavement dreams as a legitimate and important component of the grief process. For many years, these experiences were underreported or dismissed. Dreamers were reluctant to share them, fearing they would be seen as confused or unable to accept the loss. More recent work, published in peer-reviewed journals including Dreaming and a major journal of death and dying, has found that the majority of bereaved individuals who experience these dreams report them as helpful to their grief process. Not escapist, not avoidant, helpful. This finding holds across multiple independent research groups and cultural contexts, representing a meaningful shift in how grief science understands the role of dream life in bereavement. The relationship between grief and sleep is bidirectional and complex. Grief disrupts sleep. This is well established. Insomnia, early morning waking, and fragmented sleep are among the most common physical symptoms of bereavement. But sleep also serves grief. The emotional processing that occurs during sleep, and particularly during REM sleep, helps regulate the intensity of grief over time. Studies suggest that bereaved individuals who sleep adequately, even when sleep is difficult, tend to move through the acute phase of grief more gradually and sustainably than those whose sleep is severely disrupted. The brain needs sleep to grieve well, and sometimes grief gives us back the person we are grieving, just for a little while. While we do that work, some post-bereavement dreams include the dreamer becoming aware, within the dream, that the person is deceased. This is a form of lucidity, a state in which the dreamer retains some awareness of their own dreaming. These moments are described with particular poignancy. The dreamer knows this person has died, and yet there they are. And in the dream, the dreamer chooses, sometimes consciously, sometimes not, to simply be with them. Researchers note that these partially lucid grief dreams require a sophisticated form of emotional processing, holding contradictory realities at once. The loved one is gone. The loved one is here. Both are true. The sleeping brain finds space for that paradox, in a way the waking mind sometimes struggles to. Children who are bereaved also experience post-bereavement dreams, and their descriptions share many qualities with those reported by adults. Children tend to describe the deceased, a parent, a grandparent, a sibling, as appearing calm, peaceful, and recognizable. They often report that the person said something to them, or simply was with them in a way that felt safe. Child psychologists working in grief support have noted that these dreams can be significant anchors for grieving children, a way of maintaining connection with someone they love while the waking world adjusts to their absence. How we talk to children about these dreams matters. Telling them it was only a dream may miss something important about what it was doing for them. The deceased person in a post-bereavement dream often appears younger than they were at death, particularly if they had experienced a long illness or difficult decline. This is one of the more consistent and quietly moving patterns researchers have documented. The brain appears to draw on memories of the person as they were at their fullest, not as they were at the end, not as they appeared in their final days, but as they were when they were most themselves. A parent who was ill for years may appear in a dream with the vitality of their middle age. A partner who suffered may arrive without the marks of that suffering. The brain remembers them whole. Grief researchers have distinguished between what they call continuing bonds and letting go, two different models of how people relate to the deceased over time. For much of the 20th century, grief was understood as a process of detachment, gradually releasing the emotional connection to the deceased in order to reinvest in life. More recent frameworks, developed by researchers Klass, Silverman, and Nickman in the mid-1990s, argue that maintaining a continued internal relationship with the deceased is not pathological. It is, in many cases, adaptive. Post-bereavement dreams are understood, within this framework, as one of the ways people naturally maintain those continuing bonds, through the presence that sleep makes possible. The timing of post-bereavement dreams within the grief timeline is worth noting. Dreams of the deceased can occur within the first days after a loss, and they can occur years or decades later. There is no predictable schedule. Many bereaved individuals report that these dreams seem to arrive at meaningful moments, around anniversaries, during periods of particular difficulty, at times when the loss feels fresh again even years later. Whether this reflects the brain's internal calendar of grief, or simply the heightened attention a bereaved person brings to their dreams during meaningful periods, is difficult to untangle. But the sense that the dream arrived when it was needed is one of the most commonly reported features of these experiences. Post-bereavement dreams can occasionally be distressing, particularly in the early period after a traumatic or sudden loss. Some bereaved individuals report dreams in which the deceased appears in distress, or in which the dreamer is unable to reach them, or in which the death is replayed in ways that cause anguish upon waking. Grief researchers note that these more painful dream experiences tend to be associated with complicated grief or unresolved traumatic elements of the loss. They are part of the same neurological process, the brain working through something it does not yet know how to hold. But they ask more of the dreamer, over time, and with support. These dreams often shift in character. The brain finds its way towards something softer. The neurotransmitter serotonin plays a notable role in both sleep and grief. During REM sleep, serotonin levels drop significantly, part of a broader pattern that researchers call aminergic deactivation, in which several regulating neurotransmitters quiet down to allow the dream state to unfold. Grief itself involves complex alterations in serotonin signaling. Some researchers propose that the lowered serotonin environment of REM sleep may actually facilitate access to deeply held emotional memories, including memories of people we have lost, in ways that waking cognition, with its more regulated neurochemical state, does not always permit. REM sleep, in this view, is where the brain goes to feel what it cannot fully feel awake. A growing body of research has begun examining what the brain does during grief-related dreaming, drawing on neuroimaging studies of grief conducted during waking states, and on what we understand about REM sleep activation more broadly. Based on these two streams of evidence, researchers propose that post-bereavement dreams likely engage the posterior cingulate cortex, involved in self-referential processing, and the medial temporal lobe, central to episodic memory retrieval. This remains an active area of investigation. Direct neuroimaging of grief dreams during sleep is technically challenging, and the science is honest about the distance between what it currently knows and what it hopes to learn. What we can say is that the brain regions involved in knowing someone deeply are active when we dream of them. There is a concept in psychology called the internal working model, the mental representation we develop of the important people in our lives, built from years of accumulated experience. When someone we love dies, their internal working model remains. It continues to shape how we recognize kindness, how we receive warmth, what reminds us of them. It does not simply dissolve. Post-bereavement dreams may be, in part, expressions of this internal working model, the brain generating the person it still holds, in the state of consciousness most receptive to that generation. What we dream is not a ghost. It may be something more intimate, the map of a person we built inside ourselves, lit up in the dark. 25 facts in, and something is already emerging from this journey. The brain does not simply erase the people it has loved. It carries them in memory structure, in emotional architecture, in the deep patterns of expectation and recognition that years of love create. When we sleep, those structures become accessible in ways waking life does not always permit. The dreaming brain can generate the face, the voice, the warmth of someone we have lost with a completeness that waking memory can only approach. And in that generated presence, something real is happening, something the brain needs to do, something, perhaps, the heart needs too. Let's pause here for a moment. Right now, as you rest, your brain is doing something remarkable. It is sorting through everything you have felt today, deciding what to keep, what to soften, what to gently release. You don't need to help it. It already knows how. The memories you carry of the people you love, they are held in structures deeper than thought. They do not need your effort to survive the night. Simply breathe and trust what your sleeping mind already knows how to hold. And if you notice your breath slowing now, that is not an accident. That is the body agreeing with what the mind already knows. Now we continue. Dreams of deceased loved ones often carry a particular quality of light. This is something dreamers return to again and again in their descriptions. Not the visual brightness, but a quality of warmth, of clarity, of atmosphere that feels distinct from ordinary dream environments. Neuroscientists have noted that the visual cortex during REM sleep generates imagery in ways that draw on long-term visual memory. The stored palette of color, light, and texture that a person has accumulated over a lifetime. When we dream of someone we loved, we may be drawing on the specific visual memories associated with them. The quality of light in their kitchen, the warmth of a particular afternoon, a face in a specific kind of illumination. Smell is the sense most closely linked to emotional memory, and it appears in post-bereavement dreams with notable frequency. Dreamers report the scent of a loved one's perfume, the particular smell of their kitchen, the warmth of their coat. This is neurologically significant. The olfactory system has a more direct pathway to the limbic system, the emotional and memory center of the brain, than any other sense. Smell bypasses the thalamic relay used by most other sensory information. It arrives in the amygdala and hippocampus almost immediately. This direct route may help explain why scent-based memories are among the most emotionally vivid, and why they appear in dreams of the deceased with such particular power. The concept of grief work, the idea that bereavement requires active psychological labor, not simply passive waiting, was introduced by Freud and developed extensively by later theorists, including George Engel and William Worden. Contemporary grief science has both built on and complicated this framework. We now understand that grief does not follow predictable stages in the way the original 5-stage model once proposed. A finding supported by prospective longitudinal studies over the past 2 decades, But the idea that grief involves real cognitive and emotional work remains well supported. Post-bereavement dreams are increasingly recognized as part of that work. The brain processing, integrating, and gradually reorganizing around a loss. Older adults who have experienced multiple losses across a lifetime tend to have a particularly rich relationship with post-bereavement dreams. Researchers studying bereavement in older populations have noted that older adults often report a greater sense of equanimity in their grief dreams. The deceased appears at peace. The dreamer experiences comfort rather than anguish, and attribute this in part to the accumulated experience of loss and grief that older individuals carry. They have, in some sense, learned how to dream of the people they have lost. The grief landscape becomes more familiar, and within it, the dreaming brain may find its footing more easily. There is a quality to post-bereavement dreams that many dreamers describe as more real than ordinary dreams. This phenomenological vividness, the sense that the experience was somehow more than a dream, has been documented across studies and is one of the defining features of these experiences. Researchers propose several neurological explanations. The emotional significance of the material may drive deeper encoding and more coherent reconstruction during dreaming. The high activity of autobiographical memory regions generates imagery with greater fidelity than ordinary dreaming. Or something else, something we have not yet fully characterized, may be at work in the sleeping brain when it generates the presence of someone irreplaceable. The science is honest about the limits of its current reach. Dreams involving deceased parents are among the most frequently reported post-bereavement dream experiences. This reflects both the statistical reality that parental loss is among the most common forms of bereavement and the particular depth of the neurological imprint that parents leave. The parent-child relationship is the earliest and most formative relational experience of the human brain. The neural patterns established by a parent's voice, face, touch, and presence are among the oldest and deepest in the brain's architecture. When a parent dies, the brain is asked to reorganize around the oldest map it has. And in sleep, that map still generates, producing the face and voice that shaped the earliest self. Dreams of deceased children are described by those who have experienced them as among the most emotionally complex and significant experiences of their grief. Parents who have lost a child to illness, accident, or any cause frequently report dreams in which the child appears. And these dreams carry an intensity that survivors describe as unlike any other grief experience. Research with bereaved parents suggests that these dreams are particularly valued because they offer something that ordinary waking memory cannot: the presence of the child as they were, or sometimes as they might have been, older, well, at peace. The brain's capacity to generate this experience is simultaneously heartbreaking for many parents, deeply precious. Neuroimaging research on grief, conducted during waking states, where direct measurement is more accessible, has found that bereaved individuals show altered patterns of connectivity in the default mode network, a set of brain regions active during rest, self-reflection, and autobiographical memory. Regions associated with self-referential processing and social cognition are particularly affected. Researchers propose that these same alterations likely shape the character of grief dreams during sleep, as the default mode network remains active across both rest and dreaming. The brain reorganizing around a loss does not stop at the boundary of consciousness. It continues its work throughout the night, And sometimes that work surfaces as a face we know. Arriving in the dark, some bereaved individuals report that post-bereavement dreams feel like messages, that the deceased loved one communicated something specific, something that felt intended. The scientific community approaches this question carefully, neither dismissing the experience nor claiming to fully explain it. What can be said is this: the brain is capable of generating communication that feels authentic and external, even while entirely internally produced. The unconscious mind holds enormous amounts of knowledge about the people we have loved, their values, their patterns, what they would say in a given situation, how they would respond. When the dreaming brain generates a person we love, it draws on all of that knowledge. The message may feel like it comes from them. In a meaningful sense, it does. Culture shapes not only how people interpret post-bereavement dreams, but what they allow themselves to experience within them. In cultures where continued relationship with deceased ancestors is considered natural and important, including many indigenous cultures across the Americas, Africa, and Asia, individuals may be more likely to report and value these dreams. In cultures where a sharp boundary between the living and the dead is maintained, where dreams of the deceased may be viewed with caution or seen as signs of difficulty accepting loss, these experiences may be reported with more ambivalence. The dreams themselves, researchers suggest, may not differ much across cultures. What differs is what people are permitted to do with them. The role of expectation in post-bereavement dreaming is worth considering. Research in dream science has established that what people think about before sleep, their preoccupations, their desires, their fears, influences the content of their dreams. This is sometimes called dream incorporation. Some bereaved individuals report intentionally thinking of a loved one before sleep, with the hope of dreaming of them. The evidence suggests this does have some influence. Not a guarantee, but a gentle invitation. The brain, going into sleep carrying the image and memory of someone loved, may be more likely to generate them in the dream state. Grief and longing may, in this sense, to be one of the mechanisms that brings these dreams about. Waking up from a post-bereavement dream and finding reality, the loss, the absence, can be one of the most difficult moments in grief. Researchers who work with bereaved individuals hear this, described often the few seconds of grace before the knowledge returns. The room, the quiet, the awareness of who is not there. This moment, called the grief ambush by some clinicians, is experienced by many bereaved people regularly, not only after dreams, but in waking from any sleep. What the research also shows is that the emotional residue of a positive post-bereavement dream, the warmth, the sense of connection, often persists beyond that moment of reorientation. The brain carries the feeling even as it accepts the fact. There is something important in the grammar of these dreams. In waking life, when we think of someone who has died, we use the past tense. They were, they had, they used to. In post-bereavement dreams, the grammar changes. They are here. They are speaking. They are holding your hand. Researchers in psycholinguistics who have studied grief narratives note that this shift from past to present tense, from was to is, represents one of the brain's most significant contributions to grief processing. In the dream, the relationship is not over. It exists in the present, and something in that present tense experience, even briefly, may allow the grieving brain to rehearse a relationship that does not end. Dream recall itself, the ability to remember a dream after waking, is influenced by a range of factors including sleep architecture, arousal levels at waking, and emotional significance of the dream content. Post-bereavement dreams are among the most frequently and vividly recalled dreams that bereaved individuals report. This is consistent with the finding that emotionally significant dream content is better consolidated in memory. The brain, in other words, holds on to these dreams. It is less likely to let them dissolve in the first minutes of waking in the way that many ordinary dreams do. The face, the voice, the feeling, these linger, perhaps because they are meant to, perhaps because the brain recognizes their value and chooses not to let go. 40 facts in, and the picture forming is tender and clear. The grief dream is not a malfunction of the sleeping brain. It is not a trick, not a consolation prize, not the mind failing to accept reality. It is the brain doing something deeply human, generating the presence of someone it loves in the only space where such generation is possible. And in doing so, offering the grieving person something that ordinary waking cannot give. A moment that is present tense. A moment where the person is still here. The science tells us the mechanism. The dreamers tell us what it means. And both things are worth holding tonight. Just notice where you are right now. Still here. Still listening. Take a slow, easy breath. We are moving through something quiet and important tonight. The science of what happens when love does not know how to stop, even in sleep. A soft like or subscribe helps someone else find this space. Someone searching for exactly this, on a night very much like yours. And then we continue. The relationship between memory and identity is central to understanding grief dreams. We do not only lose a person when they die, we lose a particular version of ourselves, the self that existed in relationship to them, the child in relation to a parent, the partner in relation to a spouse, the friend in relation to someone who knew you in a specific, irreplaceable way. Grief involves reconstructing identity around an absence, and post-bereavement dreams, researchers suggest, are one of the places where the old self, the self in relation, gets to briefly exist again. In the dream, you are still someone's child, someone's partner, someone's friend. That too is a form of comfort. Within the continuing bonds framework, post-bereavement dreams serve a specific and important function. They are not simply memories of the deceased rising to the surface during sleep. They are active expressions of an ongoing internal relationship. The grieving mind engaging with the person it has lost in the most direct way available to it. Bereaved individuals who experience these dreams and allow themselves to engage with them, rather than dismissing them upon waking, tend to report a greater sense of continued connection and lower levels of complicated grief symptoms. The dream does not keep the person from being gone, but it keeps the relationship from being over. The sleeping brain's ability to reconstruct a specific person, their face, their voice, their particular quality of presence, is a function of what neuroscientists call episodic memory. Episodic memory stores the specific events of our lives, particular moments, in particular places, with particular people, as opposed to semantic memory, which stores general knowledge. When we dream of someone we love, we are drawing on episodic memory's archive of moments spent with that person, thousands of small scenes, conversations, ordinary instances of proximity. The brain assembles these into a coherent presence, not a photograph, a living reconstruction of someone known. Some researchers have proposed that post-bereavement dreams represent the moment when the brain's ongoing simulation of a loved one surfaces briefly into conscious experience. In sleep, with the prefrontal cortex quieted and the critical faculties at rest, the internal model the brain has been running beneath awareness becomes experience rather than background process. This surfacing is what gives grief dreams their particular quality. The sense not of remembering someone but of encountering them. The distinction matters. Remembering is looking at a photograph. Encountering is being in the room. The sleeping brain, in these moments, chooses the room. There is evidence that the quality of the relationship during life influences the nature of post-bereavement dreams. Relationships that were loving and uncomplicated tend to produce dreams of comfort and calm connection. Relationships that carried unresolved conflict or ambivalence may produce more complex or troubled dreams. Encounters in which resolution is sought. Arguments that continue. Things unsaid that press toward expression. Grief counselors who work with bereaved clients note that these more difficult dreams, while painful, may carry important information. They may represent the mind working toward resolution that waking life did not complete. Some bereaved individuals report that these dreams change over time, moving from conflict toward something softer as grief progresses. Sleep medicine and grief science have only recently begun to overlap in productive ways. For decades, these were separate fields with separate literatures. Sleep researchers studied dreaming without particular attention to grief. Grief researchers studied bereavement without particular attention to sleep architecture. The integration of these perspectives, now occurring in research centers around the world, is beginning to illuminate the specific neurological mechanisms by which sleep serves the grieving brain. We are learning, for instance, that the ratio of REM sleep to slow-wave sleep in the weeks following a loss may predict certain outcomes in grief trajectory. The sleeping brain's management of its own stages matters for how grief unfolds. The experience of grief has been shown to alter sleep architecture in measurable ways. Bereaved individuals, particularly in the acute phase of loss, show alterations in REM sleep timing, slow-wave sleep depth, and the overall structure of the sleep cycle. Some researchers propose that these alterations are adaptive, that the grieving brain reorganizes its sleep in ways that prioritize emotional processing. Whether this is true in any direct biological sense is not yet fully established. But the observation that grief changes sleep, and that sleep, in turn, changes grief, points to a relationship far more intimate than either field previously recognized. The night has its own role in mourning. Post-bereavement dreams can be deliberately worked with in therapeutic settings. Grief-focused therapies, including some approaches within psychodynamic and integrative frameworks, invite bereaved clients to explore their grief dreams in detail, noting not only the content, but the emotional texture, what the deceased communicated, what was left unresolved. Dream journaling, keeping a written record of grief dreams immediately upon waking, has been found by some grief counselors to be a meaningful practice for bereaved individuals, allowing them to preserve and revisit these experiences rather than letting them dissolve. Engaging with the dream does not prolong grief. It may, rather, Allow the dream to do its work more fully. One of the more poignant patterns documented in post-bereavement dream research is the goodbye dream. Some bereaved individuals, not all, and not predictably, report a specific dream in the period following a loss in which the deceased appears, says goodbye, and departs. These dreams are almost universally described as important. Painful, yes, but carrying a quality of completion. Grief researchers propose that these dreams may represent a particular phase of the brain's processing, a moment when the internal working model of the person transitions from active presence to beloved memory. The goodbye happens in sleep because sleep is where the most significant transitions in the grieving brain occur. Halfway through our journey tonight, and this is what we know so far, the dreaming brain carries the people we have loved with a fidelity that ordinary waking cannot always match. It draws on the deepest stores of autobiographical memory, generates the specific sensory qualities of a specific person, and offers the grieving mind a form of presence that is scientifically grounded and emotionally real. The science does not diminish these dreams. It deepens them. It tells us that the brain does not forget the people it has loved. It holds them in its architecture. It brings them forward in the dark. And something in that holding is, perhaps, one of the most generous things the human brain can do. The memory you trust most completely is remade, slightly. Each time you recall it, your brain is always writing and rewriting, not to deceive you, but to keep what you love alive and current, right now. In this moment of rest, your mind is doing that work, tending to what you carry, shaping it gently. You are not simply remembering. You are, in a real sense, still in relationship, still connected. Allow that to be enough for tonight. And we continue. Consciousness researchers have begun exploring what they call the phenomenology of grief in dreams. Not just what happens neurologically, but what the experience is like from the inside. Their findings point to something simple and profound in these dreams. The distinction between past and present collapses. The person is not remembered. They are encountered. That distinction between remembering someone and encountering them may be more than poetic. It may reflect a genuine difference in how the brain processes active simulation versus passive recall. In the dream, the processing is active. The person is generated, not retrieved, and that changes the quality of the experience entirely. Dreams involving deceased grandparents are among the most commonly reported positive post-bereavement dream experiences. Grandparents often appear in these dreams carrying a sense of calm authority, a steadiness, a warmth, an unconditional quality that the dreamer recognizes immediately. Researchers suggest this may reflect the particular emotional role grandparents occupy in many people's internal models of relationship, figures of nurture without the complexity of parenting, of love without condition, of time that moved more slowly. When the brain generates a grandparent in a dream, it may be generating something specific, a particular quality of being held that has no substitute in ordinary waking life. There is something in post-bereavement dreams that resists ordinary language. Dreamers consistently report reaching for words and finding them insufficient. The presence felt, the love communicated, the sense of having been, briefly, with someone who is gone. These are experiences that press against the edges of what language can carry. Psychologists who study transcendent experiences, those moments of unusual clarity, connection, or meaning. Note that post-bereavement dreams share certain qualities with other reported transcendent experiences: a sense of profound reality, difficulty of description, and lasting emotional significance. Whatever their source, something important happens in them. The people who have these dreams know this, and science is slowly learning to agree. Sleep architecture changes as we age, and so does the experience of grief dreams. Younger adults tend to have more REM sleep per night, concentrated toward the morning hours. Older adults experience a shift in sleep architecture, with earlier sleep onset, earlier waking, and changes in the distribution of sleep stages. Grief dreams, being primarily REM phenomena, may be experienced differently across the lifespan. Older bereaved individuals sometimes report dreaming of deceased loved ones in the early morning hours. In that soft, liminal space between sleep and waking, in a state sometimes called hypnopompia, these transitional experiences, not quite dreaming, not quite waking, may carry their own particular quality of presence. The connection between grief and creative expression is long documented across human cultures. Music, poetry, visual art, and ritual have all served as containers for the experience of loss. Post-bereavement dreams operate in a similar register. They are, in a sense, the brain's own creative response to grief, generating a form of experience that has no equivalent in ordinary cognition. Some bereaved individuals report being moved by their grief dreams, inspired to write, to paint, to compose, to reach out to someone. The dream leaves something behind that asks to be expressed. Perhaps this is one of the ways the brain transmits what it holds, not just in memory, but in the making of things. Attachment theory, developed by John Bowlby in the mid-20th century and extensively elaborated since, provides one of the most useful frameworks for understanding grief. Bowlby observed that bereavement produces responses: searching, yearning, protest at separation, that closely parallel the responses of young children separated from attachment figures. Grief, in this framework, is attachment behavior directed at someone who is no longer accessible. Post-bereavement dreams can be understood within this framework as a form of attachment behavior in sleep, the bonded brain seeking, and in the dream state briefly finding, the presence of the person to whom it is attached. The searching ends, for a little while, in sleep. The word grief comes from the Latin gravis, meaning heavy. It is a word about weight, and the physical experience of grief, the heaviness in the chest, the exhaustion, the difficulty of ordinary movement, reflects real changes in the body. Cortisol levels rise. Inflammatory markers increase. The autonomic nervous system shifts toward heightened arousal. Sleep is one of the primary regulators of all of these systems. In sleep, cortisol falls. Inflammatory activity is modulated. The autonomic nervous system shifts toward rest. The body, in sleep, begins to recover from the physical weight of grief, while the dreaming brain continues the emotional work. Night is not empty. It is healing. Some bereaved individuals report that they can sometimes feel, in the moment before waking from a grief dream, that the person is about to leave, that there is a threshold approaching, a return to ordinary consciousness, and that the figure in the dream is beginning to recede. These moments are described with a particular tenderness. Some dreamers reach out in the dream, trying to hold on a little longer. Some simply watch. Some feel the person communicating something in those final dream seconds. A last gesture, a last look, a last word that the dreamer carries into waking. The neuroscience of these transitional moments is not yet well understood, but their emotional reality is unmistakable. Dreams of deceased spouses or romantic partners carry specific qualities documented by grief researchers who have focused on conjugal bereavement. These dreams often involve ordinary scenes of shared life, cooking together, sitting in a familiar room, waking beside each other, that carry an intensity of normalcy. The ordinariness is the point. The dream restores the daily texture of a shared life. Researchers note that this is particularly significant because conjugal grief involves not only the loss of a person, but the loss of an entire domestic world. Routines, habits, the quiet togetherness of long-established partnership. The dream recalls not just the person, but the life built with them. Current neuroscience understands the emotion of longing, the ache for someone or something absent, as involving the same neural reward circuitry activated by anticipation of pleasure. When we long for someone, the brain's dopaminergic systems generate a state of anticipatory arousal directed at an absent target. In grief, this system persists, generating longing for someone who will not arrive. In dreams, the arrival is possible. The dreaming brain resolves the longing. However, briefly, some researchers propose that this may partly account for the comfort reported in post-bereavement dreams. Not only the emotional significance of the reunion, but the neurological satisfaction of an anticipated arrival that the waking world can no longer provide. The relationship between language and grief is complex. We often find ourselves unable to speak adequately about what we have lost. The words feel too small for the reality of someone. A whole person, irreplaceable, now gone. Post-bereavement dreams operate outside of language. They communicate in image, sensation, presence, in the pre-verbal currency of the brain's emotional life. This may be one reason they can reach something that waking conversation cannot. They do not require the right words. They bypass the limitations of language entirely. The brain communicates to itself about love and loss in a register that existed before words were invented to hold such things. Researchers studying social cognition have identified a network of brain regions, sometimes called the social brain, areas involved in understanding others, predicting their behavior, and representing their mental states. These include the temporoparietal junction, the medial prefrontal cortex, and the superior temporal sulcus. When we love someone over many years, these regions develop rich, detailed models of that specific person, continuously updated predictions about who someone is and how they will be. When a person dies, the social brain continues to run its model. In sleep, with the prefrontal cortex quieted, that model can surface as something that feels less like memory and more like presence. There is a concept in cognitive science called simulation theory. The idea that we understand other minds by modeling them within our own. We do not simply observe other people from a distance. We internally generate a version of them, using our own neural architecture to approximate their experience and perspective. This is what allows us to empathize, to predict, to love. And when someone dies, the simulation does not simply stop. Post-bereavement dreams may be the moment when that ongoing internal simulation becomes conscious experience, rising to the surface of awareness in sleep. The loved one, in a specific and meaningful sense, continues to run inside us. The quality of attention we bring to post-bereavement dreams may influence how much they contribute to grief processing. Grief counselors and psychologists who work with bereaved individuals often find that clients who engage with their grief dreams, who allow themselves to feel the emotions they contain, who reflect on what was communicated, who write or speak about what happened, report more sustained benefit from these experiences than those who dismiss them or push them away quickly. The dream offers something. What the dreamer does with that offering matters. Attention, in grief, as in so many things, shapes what becomes available. There is now broad consensus among grief researchers that grief does not have a fixed endpoint. It does not resolve into an absence of feeling. It transforms. What was acute becomes integrated. What was overwhelming becomes woven into the fabric of a life that continues. Post-bereavement dreams participate in this transformation, offering the grieving person, across months and years, occasional moments of reconnection that help maintain the relationship with the deceased in a new key. Not presence, exactly, but not pure absence either. Something in between. A continuing relationship that exists in a different mode. The dream is one of the modes through which that relationship continues. Grief researchers have noted what some call the oscillation model of grief. The observation that bereaved individuals naturally move between loss-oriented coping and restoration-oriented coping. In loss-oriented coping, the focus is on the person who has died, the grief itself, the missing, the longing. In restoration-oriented coping, the focus shifts outward, to practical matters, to rebuilding, to life going forward. Healthy grief involves movement between both. Post-bereavement dreams are, in many cases, loss-oriented moments, brief immersions in the presence of what is gone, and they may enable restoration precisely by allowing that immersion. You cannot rebuild without having first sat fully in the loss. Some bereaved individuals describe a particular phenomenon, sensing the presence of a deceased loved one while awake, in a familiar scent, a quality of light, a feeling of being accompanied that has no external source. These experiences, called extraordinary grief experiences or post-death contact experiences, are related to but distinct from post-bereavement dreams. They occur across cultures and are reported by a significant minority of bereaved individuals. Researchers approach them with the same careful attention brought to grief dreams, neither pathologizing nor fully explaining, but documenting and taking seriously the profound reality they hold for the people who experience them. The relationship with those we have loved does not always wait for sleep. The body holds grief in specific ways that are documented in psychosomatic research. The chest tightness of sadness, the heaviness of exhaustion, the hollow ache of longing. These are not metaphors. They are measurable physiological states, and the body responds to dreams of the deceased in measurable ways too. Heart rate can slow, muscle tension can release, breathing can deepen. The physical body responds to the emotional reality of the dream as if it were happening. This is grief finding a path through the body. The somatic register of loss discovering, in the dream, something that allows a different kind of settling. The chest opens, The breath comes more easily. For a little while, cross-cultural research on grief dreams has documented a phenomenon that researchers call the healing dream. A post-bereavement dream experience that produces measurable changes in mood and grief symptoms upon waking. Studies using standardized grief measures have found that bereaved individuals who report healing dream experiences show lower levels of complicated grief symptoms and greater sense of continuing bonds than those who do not. The causal direction is not entirely clear. It may be that individuals with more integrated grief trajectories are more likely to have healing dreams, rather than the reverse. But the association is consistent enough across independent studies to be taken seriously. Something in these dreams is doing something real. Dreams of deceased loved ones sometimes occur at pivotal life moments. Before a wedding, after a birth, during a major illness, at a turning point in a relationship. Bereaved individuals often describe these dreams as arriving precisely when they needed guidance or reassurance. The neuroscience of this is not mysterious. The brain under stress or at significant junctures activates emotional memory more intensely. The people who have shaped our emotional landscape are most likely to be retrieved when the landscape shifts. Whether this is the brain seeking counsel from its deepest internal models, or simply the convergence of heightened need and heightened memory activation, the experience is real, and its significance is not diminished by its mechanism. The science of sleep has increasingly recognized that sleep is not uniform across the night. The first sleep cycles are dominated by slow-wave sleep, deep, restorative, relatively dreamless. As the night progresses, REM sleep becomes more prolonged, and dreams become more elaborate, more narrative, more emotionally rich. This means that the most vivid and emotionally significant post-bereavement dreams are most likely to occur in the final hours of sleep, in the long REM periods that characterize the second half of the night. Many bereaved individuals report waking from these dreams between 4 and 6 in the morning, in that quiet pre-dawn time when the world is still and the dream is still very close. The experience of waking from a grief dream and finding someone still beside you, a partner, a child, a cat, is described by bereaved individuals as unexpectedly significant. The ordinary company of waking, the warmth of the present. Coming from a dream of someone gone, the ordinary present can take on an unusual luminosity. Grief sometimes opens the world this way, revealing what was there all along but unnoticed. The loss of one person can deepen the visibility of others, and the dream that brings the gone one close can, in the moment of waking, also illuminate the ones who remain. Researchers studying grief in children have noted that children benefit from having a language for grief dreams. When adults provide children with permission to talk about these dreams, and with frameworks that honor rather than dismiss their experiences, children report feeling less alone in their grief. They describe the dream as a visit, as comfort, as something they wanted. And when adults can receive that with care, simply listening, simply believing the child that something real and important happened, the child's grief is served in ways that clinical intervention alone cannot replicate. Grief dreams ask something of the living to be present to what another person carries in sleep. The brain's neural plasticity, its capacity to reorganize and adapt throughout life, is central to understanding how grief changes over time. In the months and years following a loss, the brain undergoes genuine structural and functional reorganization. New patterns of thought form, The internal working model of the deceased gradually shifts from active expectation to integrated memory. Post-bereavement dreams may be part of this reorganization, markers of where the brain is in its processing, and instruments of the processing itself. The early dreams, often vivid and destabilizing, may reflect the early work of reorganization. The later dreams, often gentler and more peaceful, may reflect a brain that has found, slowly, a new way of carrying what it loves. 75 facts in, and the answer this journey has been building toward is becoming clear. When you dream of someone who has passed away, the brain is not deceiving you. It is not malfunctioning, not failing to accept reality, not stuck. It is doing something deeply and specifically human, accessing the neural architecture of a relationship, generating the presence of someone loved, and offering the grieving mind a form of contact that has nowhere else to exist. The dream is not a replacement for the person. Nothing is. But it is something real. A moment when the brain's most intimate knowledge of someone becomes, briefly, experience again. And in that moment, something essential to the human capacity for love is happening. You might be feeling tired now. That's exactly right. Sleep does not come when you try. It comes when you stop trying. This is precisely that moment. Notice it. Your body knows this rhythm. It has done this thousands of times before this night. It does not need your help. It simply needs your permission. Whatever you have been holding tonight, the facts, the feelings, the faces, you can set them down now. We're almost there. The brain never stops loving, even in sleep, even in the years after a loss. The neural patterns shaped by someone we loved remain, changed, softened, but present. They influence how we recognize kindness, how we receive warmth, how we understand what it means to be cared for. The people we have loved leave themselves in us, not as ghosts, as architecture, the structure of who we have become. Sleep is where the brain does its most honest work. It is not performing. It is not managing. It is simply processing. Whatever is most true, whatever is most held. For the grieving mind, sleep is where love goes when the day is too busy to hold it, where the missing comes forward, where the face, the voice, the presence is permitted to arrive. Every dream of someone we love is built from something real. The specific way they laughed, the warmth of a particular afternoon, a gesture so familiar it was invisible until it was gone. The brain stored all of it. It holds it now. And some nights, it gives it back, not as loss, as presence. The gift the sleeping brain offers to those who grieve. The deceased, in dreams, are often described as at peace, not performing peace. Simply peaceful, settled, free of whatever burden they carried in their final days. Researchers note this as one of the most comforting features of post-bereavement dreams. The loved one appears well, fully themselves, as if wherever they are now, they have arrived somewhere good. Grief is not a problem to be solved. It is a measure of love. The larger the love, the deeper the grief. And the sleeping brain, in its quiet wisdom, seems to understand this. It does not rush the grief. It does not try to fix it. It simply continues to hold the person, continues to generate their presence, for as long as the love requires. Some people never stop dreaming of those they have lost. Years pass, decades, and still the person arrives in sleep. Less frequently, perhaps, but when they come clearly. The brain does not forget the faces it has loved most. It keeps them in its deepest storage, brings them out. Occasionally, on quiet nights, like looking at a photograph that breathes. The science of sleep is still learning. It knows the mechanisms, the stages, the neurotransmitters, the neural pathways, but the full meaning of what happens when the sleeping brain generates the presence of someone beloved that is still being understood. Perhaps it will always resist complete understanding. Perhaps that is appropriate. Some things are better held than explained. There is no wrong way to grieve. There is no wrong way to dream. There is no wrong way to feel about a dream of someone gone. If it comforted you, that is real. If it hurt, that is real. If it left you with something wordless and important, that is real too. The dream served you. Trust what it gave. Research in palliative care has documented that individuals approaching their own death sometimes begin to dream of deceased loved ones, parents, siblings, partners, who appear welcoming and warm. These end-of-life dreams, reported by palliative nurses and hospice workers across cultures, are described as deeply comforting to those experiencing them. The person approaching death often reports feeling less afraid, feeling that someone is waiting. Researchers who have studied these experiences, including work published in the Journal of Pain and Symptom Management, note that whatever their neurological source, and scientists are genuinely careful here, what they offer the dying is unmistakable: a reduction in fear and a sense of being accompanied. That, perhaps, is what the dreaming mind knows how to do best. The sensation of a hand held in a dream, a voice saying your name, the specific texture of someone's presence, the way it felt to be near them. These are not illusions. They are memories, embodied and given motion. The brain holds sensory memory of the people it loves with extraordinary fidelity. In sleep, it accesses that memory, and for a little while, it gives you back the feeling of being with someone you miss. Post-bereavement dreams tend to decrease in intensity over time. The acute vividness of early grief dreams gradually softens. The presence becomes quieter. The emotional charge, while still significant, becomes more peaceful. This mirrors the arc of grief itself, moving from the raw, overwhelming early phase towards something more integrated. The dream changes as the grief changes. Both are heading, slowly, towards something that can be lived with. You are not alone in what you carry tonight. Across the world, in every time zone, other people are sleeping and dreaming of someone gone. Other people are lying still after waking, holding the fading warmth of a face they love. Other people are letting the feeling stay as long as it will. Grief is one of the things that makes us most purely human, and dreams are one of the places where we carry it most tenderly. The word remember comes from the Latin re, again, and memo, mindful. To remember is to make someone present again in the mind. Post-bereavement dreams do something older and deeper than remembering. They do not make the person present in the mind. They make the person present. Full stop. No qualifier. No past tense. For the duration of the dream, the person is simply there. That is not memory. that is something else, something for which we may not yet have the right word. Among all the structures we have studied in the natural world, the human brain stands apart in one particular way. It can generate the experience of another specific person, their face, their voice, their way of being in the world, entirely from within itself, using nothing but stored knowledge and the architecture of love. Whether other minds in other forms do something similar, we cannot yet say with certainty, but we know the human brain does it, and tonight, it may do it for you. Could dreaming of someone who has passed away tell us something about how the brain holds love? It already has. It tells us that love is not simply an emotion that fades when its object disappears. It is a structural reality, an architectural fact. The brain builds for the people it loves. It builds and it keeps building, even when they are gone. Especially when they are gone. Grief changes over time, but it does not end. It becomes part of who you are. The person who is gone becomes part of the landscape of your inner life. Permanent, integrated, known, and the dreams continue. As the landscape continues, as the love continues, each dream is a small proof of something. Not that the dead return, but that love does not expire. It simply finds new forms. Sleep is one of those forms. The brain, during dreaming, has access to something that waking consciousness does not always reach. It has access to the full weight of what it has stored, without the dampening effect of prefrontal inhibition, without the cognitive editing of rational thought. This means that in dreams, we can feel the full size of our love, the full reality of how much a person meant. Waking life contains this knowledge, but holds it at a slight remove. Sleep removes the remove, and what remains is the love, full and clear, moving through the dreaming mind like light through still water. There is a form of comfort available only in sleep, not the comfort of being told something true, not the comfort of understanding something clearly, the comfort of being, briefly, with someone who is gone, of not having to explain the loss, of not having to hold it at arm's length for the sake of functioning. In the dream, the loss is paused, and the person is simply there. That particular comfort is one of sleep's most private gifts, and it belongs entirely to you. The brain is always working toward integration, always moving, however slowly, toward a way of holding what it has experienced. Grief is part of this. Dreams are part of this. The post-bereavement dream, visited and revisited across the years of a grief, is part of the slow work of making the loss livable, not erasing it, not overcoming it, making it something that can be carried, tenderly, with the person present in some form, all the way to the end of a life. Some things the brain does not tell us in language. Some things it tells us in images, in feelings, in the particular quality of a presence generated in sleep. The science tells us the mechanism, but it cannot tell us what it means to wake from a dream of your mother and feel, for a few seconds, that you have just been with her. The science does not have a word for that. It simply knows that it is real, that it matters, that the brain, in its great and careful love, made it happen. The gift of a post-bereavement dream cannot be scheduled. It cannot be guaranteed, but it can be invited. By sleeping, by resting, by letting the brain do its ancient, unhurried work, by not asking the night for anything other than what it can give, and sometimes On a night you did not expect, the person is there, quietly, completely, themselves. And the brain, which has been carrying them all this time, offers what it has been holding, all that love, given back to you in sleep. Sleep is an act of trust. You close your eyes and release the known world, the room, the body, the running list of everything that needs attention. You let it go, and in the letting go, the brain finds its way to what it holds most carefully. The people, the moments, the faces that shaped everything that followed them. Tonight, in this particular darkness, someone may be waiting in that deeper layer, not because you asked, simply because the brain, in its faithful way, remembered who you love. Grief is the price of love. And love, every researcher, every philosopher, every person who has ever lived long enough to lose someone, confirms that it is worth the price. The dream of someone gone is evidence of that love. It is the brain paying its debt, demonstrating what it holds, offering what it can offer, which is, in the end, not the person themselves, but something close, something that carries the warmth of who they were. And some nights, that is enough. The person who may come to you in a dream, if they come, is not a ghost, not a hallucination, not a wish. They are the map your brain built of someone real, a map so detailed, so deeply encoded, so faithfully held, that in the right conditions, in the darkness, in the long REM hours of early morning, it generates something that feels indistinguishable from presence. They are there, in the way that matters most to a brain that loved them, fully, precisely, without reduction. And the last fact tonight is this: the fact that you are here, that you pressed play, that you are letting these words move through you in the dark. That is not nothing. You are carrying someone. You are still in relationship. The love did not end when they did. It is here, in this moment, in this quiet room, in the body that is beginning to rest. They are held in you. They always will be. Sleep now, and let the brain do what it does best. Love the people it cannot forget, in the beautiful dark of sleep. And so, our gentle journey comes to a quiet close. We began by understanding that the brain does not simply forget the people it has loved. It builds for them, structures itself around them, continues to simulate their presence long after they are gone. We learned that in the long REM hours of early morning, that simulation surfaces as something indistinguishable from presence. We heard what dreamers across cultures consistently described that they arrived, that they were well, that something was communicated, without words needing to be sufficient. We traveled from the neuroscience of grief to the architecture of memory, from attachment theory to the soft pre-dawn hours when the most vivid dreams arrive. And through all of it, one truth emerged. Love does not require the living. It simply requires a brain that remembers. What the dreaming mind shows us in these encounters is something the waking world can lose sight of. That the relationship does not end at the death. It transforms. It moves inward. It becomes part of the structure of who you are and who you are becoming. And some nights, in the generous dark of sleep, the brain gives it back to you as presence, as peace, as love. Still, in these final minutes, Take the deepest breath you can. Think about the unity of every memory, every moment of connection, every ordinary afternoon that is now held in you as something sacred. You are not separate from the person you have loved. They are part of what built you. They live in the structure of who you are. Let your entire being dissolve into that quiet understanding, into the warmth of what you have been given and what you still carry. Prepare for deep sleep. No boundaries left, only peace. If this particular journey brought you some peace tonight, if it helped you feel less alone in what you carry, a soft like or subscribe might carry someone else here too. Someone who is searching for exactly this, on a night very much like yours. One quiet night, one sleepy soul at a time. Whatever you have been holding tonight, the grief, the love, the face you still miss, you don't need to carry it into sleep. It will still be there in the morning. Tonight, you belong only to yourself. You have traveled inward tonight. Through corridors most people never pause to notice. You touched the architecture of who you are and found it more full, more faithful, more loving than you may have known. You can allow these thoughts to fade now, like the last image of a dream at dawn. Present, then softer, then simply part of everything, leaving only the quiet, unheld calm behind. Let your breathing deepen. Let your body feel heavier, as if all you have carried today is being sorted by careful, invisible hands, and is simply setting itself down. If sleep comes, let it carry you the way memory does, not with force, but with quiet intention, into a realm where time and weight no longer matter. If your eyes are still open, the next video is waiting for you, ready to continue the journey. But if they're closed, stay there. Stay in the darkness that feels safe and warm. Tomorrow, the brain will still be holding what it loves. The maps it built of the people who shaped you will still be there, still tending, still faithful. But tonight belongs to stillness. Rest well, gentle explorer, and remember, the mind never stops loving the people it built itself around. Good night.